Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are fortunate enough to have the champ, the intellectual giant, and we also have Mohammed Hijab. Welcome, lads. So I'll just get into the topics since it's going to be a very short video. There's a hadith by the Prophet ﷺ, authentic hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ says, "Al-mu'minu al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if wa fi kullin khayr," which translates as that the strong believer is more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, and in each there's good. What does it mean in our times to be strong, to be a strong believer? Because there seems to be a discussion online where young men are always talking about being strong. What does it mean to be strong? I'll invite this is an open.
Go on, so will you start? First of all, why haven't we been around for such a long time?
Yeah, that's a question I should ask you.
The people have, like, after all this time, we used to do Saturday Night Live. You watched that?
Yeah, I watched him. I was an avid viewer.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
He went away, and that was your fault. Can you please admit in public?
See,
What happened?
to be a strong person, you need to admit your mistakes. Moving on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's go to what is strong, right? What is strong? There's many different ways of defining it, but I think the most important way of defining it is you as a Muslim are proud. You're not somebody that's meek, that's worried. One of the things I really love about Hijab is he sometimes says the most absurd things.
Sometimes.
Absurd, like ridiculous things. But I just think, you know what, that's courageous. I remember he was once refuting some person and he started mentioning flat earthers. And then he said, well, at least I give them respect that they stick to what they believe in. Even though they may be wrong, but they believe in something. And when it comes to liberals, when it comes to people who believe that fundamentally, even if there's no God, we can come up with morality, ethics, we can come up with our own moral system, our own type of way of deciding what's right and wrong. They will say, okay, for me, this is a woman, this is a man, I've come up with my own philosophy, but they'll be absolutely firm on it. When it comes to a Muslim, somebody who believes in Allah, somebody who believes in his messenger, we're very meek. Even the way we shake hands is very, very weak. When it comes to our beliefs, do you believe in this in the Sharia? Do you believe in that? People are very scared of articulating themselves, being proud of their beliefs. So I think being strong is being able to accept who you are, be proud of who you are, and be somebody that wants to project it. So it's not just a case of, okay, I believe in this, and I think you should believe in this. So that's the way I would say a strong, that's how I'd characterize what strong is.
Fascinating. So to have a strong azim, a strong believer, not being afraid to utter the truth if and when required. Would you like to add anything to that, Mr. Hijab?
Yeah, strength is of different types. It seems like, I don't know, Allah Alam, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but, in the Quran where, when Musa, alayhi salam, was interacting with the women in the well, and that story, and the woman went to her father, who some say Shu'aib, but we have no clear hadith on that, and she wanted him to work for her father, and then she said خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين, that the best person to hire or employ is the one who is al-qawi and al-amin, the strong and the trustworthy.
Yep.
And this is a beautiful ayah, or part of an ayah, which links nicely with this particular hadith. And here, if you think about the context of the ayah, yes, Musa was exhibiting some level of physical strength, but I think he was also exhibiting prudence or competence, initiative, when he was hustling to get the water for them and so on. So I think strength, and if you look at the shurrah of that particular hadith, and in general, when quwwah is mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, it's not just the physical quwwah or the physical strength, but it's prudence or it's competence in any given particular field. And this links to something great that the Prophet ﷺ told us in another hadith, which is that the best of you and the most beloved of you to Allah are those anfa'akum lin-nas, who are most beneficial to other people. So you cannot be beneficial to other people if you're not competent or prudent in a specific field. Of course, physical strength is actually a virtue, and it's always been seen as a virtue from the times of the ancients all the way to our present time. But that's one of the things that will wither away by virtue of reality. For example, in the Quran, this is a beautiful ayah where Allah mentions that we have created you min nutfatin, thumma min alaqatin, thumma yukhrijukum tifla, thumma takunu shuyukha, wa minkum man yutawaffa min qabl. That you are, were created from nutfa, then from alaqa. Then after that we have made you into children, and after that you'll be old people. And some of you will die before that, before even reaching the age of senility or old age. And so this is a natural pattern of human reality. If this hadith was specified to the physically strong, then it would obviously indicate that those who are in the mid part of their life are the most beloved to Allah. And so it cannot really be taken to mean strength in the only physical sense. It could be strength of faith, it could be strength, as I say, prudence in a more general sense. And I think that it's incumbent upon anybody living in the modern age to be good at something such that other people need them, and or that they may benefit these other people. And that's where value and would come in. So the more valuable you are in a marketplace is the more beneficial you are in a marketplace. And so it's very important that everybody examine themselves and see what their specific traits or their specific qualities may be, that they could give that to the rest of the Muslim Ummah, and thereby be beneficial to them.
Absolutely. Yes, and you're right. A lot of the scholars, while explaining this hadith, they do mention strength in belief, physical strength also is mentioned. I'll conclude with this final question, because I think we've spoken for some time. How do we advise the new generation, whereby strength is seen as solely as a physical sort of venture, or is seen as a monetary gain? So the more money someone has, then they are strong, and the more weights they can push, then they seem to be strong. And if you don't fit in this category, then you're not that alpha male, that strong man, etc., etc.
So before we think about this question, what we have to think about is the worldview that the person comes from. If you come from a worldview of hedonism, materialism, naturalism, everything is purely measured by what's physical, then it's simply going to be a case of, well, this person's stronger, or they physically look more attractive, they have a bigger house, they have a better looking wife, they have a private jet, whatever it is. And nowadays, if you go to TikTok, go to Instagram, whatever social media, this type of lifestyle is shown to be the ideal lifestyle. If you're a high value man, you have to be a high value man from the perspective of these monetary gains. The problem with that is fundamentally derived from a liberal worldview. That is fundamentally derived from a worldview in which you're chasing dopamine and there's nothing higher or greater than that. But when it comes to the Islamic perspective, the Islamic perspective teaches you that real manhood is where you are proactive, where you are a leader. You don't actually go with the society, you swim against the society. So if an avalanche is coming down, you take an axe and a shovel and you go in the other direction, you go through the bloody avalanche and you go up. And what does that show you? That shows you that Islam builds characters which go against the grain, which go against the tide. What's the clearest example of this? The clearest example of this is the Sahaba, who were in a society in which you had shirk, you had racism, you had all these types of issues, and they went against their society. One of the most powerful things we also learn from the prophets is that they go against society even if the entire society is deviant. So when we look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's smashing the idols. His father is the one who's making the idols. So what we find is that Islam doesn't say become the best and the most famous and the most valuable in what society is telling you is the most highest virtue. You choose the virtue not according to what society has said, but according to what Allah has dictated. And from that perspective, you go against the grain. This is why I really believe the best Muslims are not those who are, focusing on their worship and they happen to be in a Muslim country and everything's nice and comfortable. That's actually a good lifestyle, that's fine. But really, where you really know the strength of the Muslims is where they're in the middle of a very difficult situation, but they hold to the flag of Islam. They refuse to move left or right according to liberal whims or according to any other political pressure or any other societal pressure. That is true Islamic strength.
Well put, so we'll really appreciate that. Mr. Hijab, what's your 2 cents in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing of the alpha male thing is a very reductionist and simplistic idea of what a man should be. I've spoken about this before, but I think that the key and defining characteristics for a man are generosity and bravery. I think there's good hadith evidence for this. For example, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned that, you know, شَرُّ مَا فِي الرَّجُلِ, you know, the worst things to be found in a man is بُخْلٌ هَالَعْ وَجُبْنٌ خَالَعْ, that is cowardice and miserliness. And so the opposite must be then true as well, that a good man, a virtuous man specifically, would be a man who's very brave and a man that's very generous. Because these 2 traits in particular seem to be the traits that men need to have in excess of women in order to provide and protect them in a way that the opposite wouldn't require. That's not to say that women shouldn't be brave and they shouldn't be generous, but it's more to say that a man needs it more in abundance in order to fulfill his function than a woman would be. And this is something understood a long time ago and continues to be understood now. But I think we should also emphasize the role of compassion. You know, I mean, Allah mentions in Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We haven't sent you except for mercy to humankind. Now, he doesn't mention izzah, or he doesn't mention quwwah, or he doesn't mention anything of these things of power, physical power and strength and so on, as much as he mentions compassion, you know. And so that indicates, because really, if you think about it, strength is a prerequisite for mercy. Let me give you a practical thought experiment type example. You cannot be merciful to someone that you do not have some level of control over. If you see someone in prison, and the prison guard comes to them and he opens the gate, and he starts moving him around, you know, the prisoner, and the prisoner says, "Listen, I'm being merciful to you right now. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to be merciful to you right now." It would be a nonsensical statement. Whereas if the prison guard, decided to act in a very benevolent manner to the prisoner, that could be seen as merciful because the control lies with the prison guard. So actually a prerequisite for mercy is control, is power, is strength. And so it's not just it's putting yourself in a position of strength. Clearly the Prophet told us this, الْيَدُ الْعُلْيَا خَيْرٌ مِنْ الْيَدِ السُّفْلَى, that the upper hand is better than the lower hand. But then deciding to do good with that, deciding to be benevolent and magnanimous and forgiving and merciful and compassionate. I think that is true manhood. Sometimes we see the brash and the confident side of things, but we don't see the benevolent and the magnanimous and the forgiving side of things. So when you combine them, you get the full masculine image. I was just in the southeast of Asia, Southeast Asia. I went to 3 different countries, and the people there seem to collectively have a different temperament to the people, for example, in the West and other places in the world. People in the Far East have that temperament. It's this very polite kind of temperament. I learned a lot just by observing people's behavior there. And I think that we need to bring back politeness as well. Now, I'm the least to talk about this, as you guys said. Honestly, I learned from it. I was like, I'm a very crass...
You got domesticated while you were there.
Guy, and I was thinking, you know what, I need to bring some of that into my character as well, because very rough around the edges, very unrefined, very whatever. I need to bring at least some of that into that. So you have to look at where you stand on a spectrum. If you stand on a spectrum where you're maybe meek, as you mentioned, placid, a little bit too hesitant, then maybe you need to have an injection of maybe confidence and temperamental exuberance. But if on the other hand you stand on like a spectrum where you're ultra extroverted, then try and inject some politeness into your life, but you're trying to be all-rounded. I think a real man has all-rounded set of virtues and attributes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for enlightening us, and thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi